What's going on, guys? It's Michael here again with another video today with the Modern Mindset. Today, I wanted to speak about a specific topic, and that one being reflection. I think that, reflecting on yourself, reflecting on others, reflecting on just your overall life really plays a significant role in actually making yourself better in all dimensions. And what I mean by that is that when you are consistently sitting down and reflecting on yourself, you essentially start almost studying yourself, right? It's almost like studying like any subject. And a lot of the times I found that, at least in my own life, that for a good portion, I mean, naturally, right now I'm almost 28, I'm about halfway through 27. And a good portion of my life, kind of leading up to, I would say, even my mid 20s, I was kind of existing and living without actually understanding myself and understanding who I am, what gets me going, what slows me down, what's my strengths, what's my weaknesses. And when you kind of hone on that and you really start to understand that about yourself, that could actually really benefit you for all avenues of life. And one thing I found it primarily helpful was even in my own career. I see that, especially because my career obviously, requires me to, interact with people all the time. I'm talking with people all the time. I'm sitting down, we're discussing, we're having conversations. And a lot of the times when people are telling me their story, I feel like I can almost put myself in their shoes. I can relate more just because I've kind of understood myself at this point in time, you know. And I'm not talking about strengths and weaknesses like, oh, I'm really, I'm really susceptible to, eating sweets if they're put in front of me, like that's not really necessarily like a weakness. That's just kind of like a craving sort of thing that is inherent to all people, most of people at least. But what I'm talking about are true weaknesses, true strengths. you know when you sit back and you kind of look at yourself like, wow, one of my strengths is that, I take initiative for things. I don't wait for people to ask me to do something. I just do it. Another example maybe of a weakness would be, maybe I put off things too much. Maybe I procrastinate. Maybe I say I'm going to do something and then I don't end up doing it. And then what happens is that then I naturally leave tasks unfinished and I never get them done. And naturally, I don't want it to sound like this is some sort of like super, motivational, spiel about, do better, be better, blah, blah, blah. But the reason why I've been able to develop, a greater mindset to even have its rippling effects in my own career, in my own life, in my own relationships with others, is largely because of the time that I took and the time that I spent really learning about myself. I think a big thing is that I used to really feel like I wasn't calm around people, you know. I grew up pretty much with my immediate family. My parents were refugees. And I think that because I didn't grow up around a lot of people, I didn't have that kind of constant exposure. So every time I'd go into a big group setting, and even sometimes I find myself even, having that same experience, I just get a little nervous. I almost get like a little bit overstimulated. And I think a big part of that is, I didn't know why. I used to just think, oh, wow, around in crowds, I just feel a little bit nervous. I don't know why I feel so overwhelmed. I feel so I just feel uneasy. And then I really sat down and I sat with myself and I looked back and I was like, wow, I didn't really grow up with any cousins. I didn't have anyone really to go to like any weddings, or, where people gather together, barbecues, very rarely, Big portions of the reason why I was feeling nervous about, being in social settings was because of that. At the end of the day, was because of that. And how did I get to that conclusion? Was that I sat down and I really studied myself. When I kept realizing something was happening to me, and I said, okay, why? Let's go back. Let's go back in my own mind. Let's go back in time. Let's look at my whole life. Let's look at the reason for it. And when you start doing that, you're going to find that you can find these little things about yourself that typically stem from, adolescence, childhood, but you can find those things and you can work on it. And once personally I started realizing that about myself, it completely changed for me. Even when I was around other people, when I started going in social settings, I was aware of it. So it really knocked it down like 75%. Just because I was aware of it, I was like, oh, okay, this is because I haven't really been exposed to this. I'm not used to it. Versus going my whole life without knowing why. And then all of a sudden I'm like, oh, I just have this problem. I'm just not good in social settings. I just don't feel good. I get nervous. No, there's a reason for it. There's a reason for everything. And it's up to you to find out the reasons why you feel a certain ways. Some people, they get extremely angry quick. Some people, they are extremely outgoing. They have the ability to just connect. They're extroverted. They talk. They everywhere they go, they connect with people. And most of the time, actually, if you look at it, they grew up around a lot of people. They grew up around different social settings. They're always exposed. They had that exposure, and they just kind of worked on it from there, naturally. But people sometimes think, oh, I mean, they're just naturally like that. But there's a reason for everything. So that's basically the gist I'm trying to get at today is that I hope my example helped a little bit. But you got to reflect on yourself, man. You got to reflect on yourself. You got to study yourself, get an idea of who you are, just like any sort of character in any sort of video game. What's your stats? What's the how are you, under pressure? Study yourself. Are you someone that takes initiative? Are you someone that gets angry easily, doesn't take criticism? Why do some people grow up, they're unable to take any form of criticism? And likely there's a stemming factor from that, from earlier in their life, that they just haven't really analyzed or assessed. Anyways, guys, that's it for the video today. I hope it was helpful, quick and easy, but really reflecting on yourself is a big thing. It's really helped me in terms of my own life, my own capabilities, figuring out my own strengths, figuring out my own weaknesses, because we all have weaknesses. If we sat here and we said that, oh, we all have strengths, we're all just, perfect. We're not perfect, but we can always find out about our imperfections and at the same time work on them to just make them a little bit better. Anyways, guys, take care, okay?